Today we're going to be discussing all three of EcoFlow's generators. There's actually a fourth model which is a gasoline only of this version, but since this is exactly the same, just dual fuel now, we'll use this one as the example. We'll discuss pros and cons of all three of these models, and then hopefully by the end of this video, you'll know if one of these is right for you or if maybe more of a traditional generator would be a better option. Okay, we're going to start with this generator first, and if you are unfamiliar with EcoFlow products and you're new to the EcoFlow family and you don't own anything, then smart generators are probably not a good idea for you because they're really meant to communicate within the EcoFlow system and EcoFlow's products like EcoFlow Delta Pro, new EcoFlow Delta Pro 3, and then all other types of EcoFlow smart power stations. Now when it comes to the smart generators, there is one problem a lot of people complained about was the DC charging cable. These are a little bit under 17 feet, but there is now a new extension that is going to be coming out. I wish I had it for this video, but unfortunately it's just going to be delayed a little bit until I get it. So it's going to look a little bit like this. This will allow you to pair up to 3 of these cables together. So that means now you can triple the length of it. So now this should open up a lot of options for people out there that may already have this, that wanted a longer cord, which we've all been waiting for. So now you will be able to extend this out if you need 2 cords or maybe 3, at least now you have an option. Now, of course, depending on what Delta Pro unit you have, you will still have to use the generator plug. So if you have a power kit, Delta Pro 3, then this little plug is still going to be needed versus some of the other units out there like Delta 2 Max or the new Delta 3 Plus. They can directly plug in through the XT150 connector. So now that we have one issue fixed, we will talk about some of the problems and issues with this and some of the benefits to it. Now this is the second version of the original 1800 watt generator that's a smart generator. The first one was gas only. This one is now a dual fuel. It can run off of propane. Now I did show some videos where you can hook this up and make it natural gas as well, and this can provide up to about 1800 watts of power at max. Now realistically at max, I mostly get 1650 watts, and this has also been stated by others, 1650 to about 1700 is what people see max out of these. Now here's a problem with max is what I have a lot of issues with people doing this constantly. They will get a generator and run the thing at max load constantly, and then after about 200 or 300, maybe 500 hours, they end up having engine problems and they wonder why. You shouldn't be running any piece of equipment at max load for hours on end. If you had a brand new chainsaw, would you go hold the throttle at wide open and just let it run for hours? Probably not. That's like with any piece of equipment, you shouldn't be running it at max. If you need 75% continuous output or more, then you really should be looking into a bigger generator. This way you're not straining it. That extra amount of power is supposed to be a once in a while for short durations. Hence, one thing I don't like about this generator is that there is no warm-up cycle when you do plug this in and you have it automatically start with the DC cable. When this fires up, it'll ramp up in about 3 to 5 seconds from pretty much the 0 RPM, fire up and idle for a second or two, and then start to ramp up all the way pretty much to max RPM, even with a 1000 watt load on it. Hence, eco mode doesn't work when you have the DC cable plugged in. Now, if you are using this to charge it up with AC, well then the eco mode does actually work until you get to around about 1000 watts, and then you start reaching more than max RPMs of this engine. It may not be a max load, so you're not going to burn quite as much fuel at max. Now, I have done a couple polls to ask people how many hours they've been getting out of this engine. This one being mine personally, I have just a little over 40 hours. Even though it only registers 4 now, I managed to do a software update, and I was also doing some testing where I had the battery disconnected. I actually managed to reset the hour meter on this thing all the way back to 0. So when I was at about 36 to 37 hours, well, it went back to 0, and now I have about 4 on it again. If you actually look in the hour meter, there's 4 hours on it, so that was one little problem that I had with this generator. Now, most of the time when I do use it, I actually pull start it. Some people were complaining about the starter, and one of the reasons I think the starter on this thing is a little bit weak is because of the battery. If we pop off this side cover, one of the things I don't like is this smaller battery. It just doesn't seem to have enough cold cranking amps. That way when you are starting this automatically, it just seems like it tries to start at first and then it stops and then it goes again, and then once it's actually rotated, the engine's actually moving, it does pretty well, and it usually starts up on the second or third time once the unit has been primed. If you just hook up your propane line, it might take a full cycle, even with you shutting it off and then turning it back on, for it to fully prime all the air. out of the hose, make it inside to the internal regulator that's in here through the hose that goes to the carburetor. So sometimes that can make it to where it will need 2 full cycles in order for it to start. Once it is fully primed up, then it usually starts on the first or second round, and away it goes and you don't have to touch it. Now this engine is made by Ratto Engineering. They make a ton of engines out there for most of the generators that we use out there today. Whether it's Champion, Wind, Predator as well, they all use engines from Ratto Engineering based out of China. Now being that this is a MZ80 engine, this is a Yamaha clone engine. It's a pushrod motor. Unlike Honda, they use actually a timing belt in their motors. They both have pros and cons to it. Being a pushrod motor, they are a little bit louder versus a timing belt is quieter. Now I have no doubt that this engine will run a long time if you properly care for it and not run the thing wide open constantly. I tell people this all the time. You just can't go out there and run it at 80%, 90% of its load on a 100-degree day and not expect to have a short lifespan out of it. Even though this has a steel sleeve, there are already users out there that have over 1,000 hours on this, and this has been verified. There's a lot of users with several hundred hours, and then there's other people like me, which I have so many solar and batteries now, I don't use it quite as much like a few years ago when I used to use generators a lot. It's just becoming less and less now that I have more solar. Now when it comes to maintenance, this is the easiest one to maintain. When it comes to doing your air filter, oil changes, or if you need to clean the spark arrestor, this is actually the easiest one so far to work on. Now one of the main problems with any generator out there, doesn't matter which brand it is that the low speed jet will get plugged up. The low speed jet is on the other side of this carburetor, and so you have to take the carburetor off so you can access this. This is one of the main problems people will have with their generators when starting it up. If the small jet or pilot jet, whichever one you want to call it, is plugged up, it will cause a no start condition. Now this is on gasoline anyway. It has nothing to do with propane. Propane doesn't even use the carburetor at all except for an entry point. It has nothing to do with the jetting or anything else. But when your small jet is plugged, this will cause your generator to hesitate at idle. It'll go bring up and down with no load on it. Not just the smaller little hesitation that you might hear. That's usually just a lean setting that all of these generators have to meet in order to be EPA compliant. So you'll hear them kind of bring when there is no load on it. But the thing is, nobody runs a generator without a load. I don't see anybody out there just running it and letting it idle without something plugged into it. Once you plug in a load to it, that situation goes away and it's fine. My Hondas do exactly the same thing where the idle goes up and down constantly until I provide a load. Now as far as reliability of this unit, I have no doubts that the engine will last a long time if properly cared for and you're not constantly running it above its limits. You should be running between 50 and 75% or less, unless you need to run it a little bit higher once in a while. Those are for short durations. Now when it comes to some of the other electronics though, those are the problems we don't really know yet because these are still relatively new. Now what about the starter? You can actually get a starter for this. This is not a new engine and EcoFlow didn't build this, they didn't create it. So obviously somebody did, so that means yes, there's parts for it. There's a lot of parts out there for a lot of generators and they can be serviced from a lot of different small engine mechanics. The starter for this unit is actually out of a Ryobi. It's the 2+ system I think, or whichever one has the auto start. I actually have the part number. I'll even leave it down below, that way you guys can see it. As far as pull cords, ignition coils, carburetors, you can get all of those parts. I find it annoying when people say you can't get parts for any off-brand generators, which is simply untrue. You can go to eBay, you can go to Amazon, you can go to all kinds of Google searching and you will find parts for a ton of different stuff. So it is completely false when people are like, oh, I can't get a carburetor for my Predator engine. That is so untrue. They're everywhere, and it's funny because people just don't want to take the time to do the research and go look at a part number and simply punch it up. Now these batteries are a little bit harder to locate. I found it once and I haven't been able to find it again. I even tried before this video. Now all you need is a battery that's the same voltage and you can literally use a jump starter. I particularly don't like the DC charging on this just because it ramps up all of the engines. It doesn't matter which smart generator it is, but it's because of that. It's one of the main reasons I don't like DC charging, is that it simply just goes all the way up to max RPM even when it's cold outside, and I just don't like that. There needs to be some kind of a delay on it. That way when the engine starts, there's about a 15 to 30 second delay where it can just sit there and idle, warm up a little bit, and then slowly ramp up and go. That way it doesn't do it all within about 15 to 20 seconds. Now being that this is one of the older generators, This one we have feedback on. We know that this generator can be a good generator. Are there people out there with problems with it? Sure, because one, they either don't know how to work it, or two, they've ran it at max load for so many hours, or three, they just got a bum unit. And it's a machine. Machines break. I don't care if you spend $1,000 or $80,000 and buy something like this. I've seen things like these break down in 3,000 miles and they're junk, but yet people still go buy them. All of a sudden, now they want to call something like this a problem because it just didn't work for them. But you have a whole bunch of other happy users out there. Now back to the carburetor with the pilot jet. Those are going to be 90% of your problems when these do not start. They actually plug up more often than you think. I've had brand new generators out of the box that will not start. I will take that small pilot jet out, clean it, which literally you need just a small piece of copper wire, and you know what happens? Third pull, it fires right up. And so instead of the generator being the problem, it's actually more like dumb luck. And I've had this happen with a lot of generators, even after so many hours of running. It could be 10 hours later and they will just plug up, because you can see here in this video how small that hole is. Instead of the generator being the problem, again, it's just debris from either dirty fuel or not having a pre-filter, which I suggest people put those on, or if you just run propane, well, then you don't have those issues. That is one of the beauties of propane, is that, again, it completely bypasses the carb. The carburetor is really just an entry point. I can take that carburetor off, throw it on the ground, and this will still run on propane as long as I provide an entry point, because it does nothing more than that. Now, the only other thing with this generator is that it only has one AC outlet and then it has a DC outlet. So if you're going to use this for AC charging only and you're not going to use any of the smart features or any of the DC options, this isn't really a good option for you. This is really best suited if you are going to use the automatic start features within the EcoFlow ecosystem. Now, if you're wondering if this hooks up to the Delta Pro Ultra, it does not. There are no smart generators currently that hook up to Delta Pro Ultra. Will we see one someday? We all hope for one, and I think it could happen, but as of right now, none of them do. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next generator. And the new Smart Generator 3000. Such a love-hate relationship with this unit already. Now, this is EcoFlow's newest smart generator, which has a 98cc engine from Ratto Engineering. It's also a dual fuel, so it runs off of propane and can provide 2,000 watts of max peak power with gasoline, or about 1,800 watts max peak with LPG or propane. Now, this generator actually, if you look at the specs, provides about 20 kilowatt hours of energy per a 20-pound bottle of propane. That's actually the same as the other generator on the 80cc engine, which kind of makes you think bigger engine, but it's having to work a little bit less, as this one turns quite a bit less RPM, and this one is actually the quietest one of the bunch. And it does come with a 2-year warranty. It even has a cool little trap door so you can get to your propane hookup. It has a manual and also an auto feature on the side. That way this can automatically start and stop, just like all the other smart generators, but this one is different as it doesn't do DC charging at all. So that smart communication cable that we looked at earlier is actually of no use. This one only has 2 AC outputs, and what it does is this will communicate directly through Bluetooth. And right now this is only able to be used with EcoFlow's new Delta 3 or the Delta 3 Plus. So this just communicates with Bluetooth. So when the battery is low on Delta 3 Plus, it'll tell Smart Generator, hey, I need to fire up. It can actually tell when there is an extension cord plugged in, because it won't do anything unless it actually detects it. And then it says, okay, I'm ready to start. Here we go. It starts and it will start charging Delta 3 Plus through AC versus DC, which is kind of interesting that they went this direction with this unit. How come they didn't stay with DC charging? I was kind of curious about that. Now, one thing I do like about this one runs way better than the original smart generator that we just looked at. Instead of this one ramping up to like max RPM, even with eco mode or AC, and then the other one will slowly ramp down, this one will start like a normal generator in eco mode, and then it'll just slowly ramp up its RPM as the load increases and acts much like a traditional generator, because that's basically what it is. It's an inverter generator. It puts out a pure clean sine wave, and so this is able to charge basically any of your smart devices or critical items with good clean power. So again, a little bit interesting why they didn't go the DC route. Let the love-hate begin. Now, this generator is the best running one. It is also the quietest, but one of the main features I look at is being able to service it. This one is not service friendly whatsoever because, again, remember when I said that the carburetor is 90% of your problems with that low speed jet? After running this one for 4 hours, I actually had some running issues. It would not run on gasoline anymore. As soon as I fired it up, it had that inconsistent idle, and if I put a load on it, it pretty much died. So then my thought was, okay, carburetor. And it's not uncommon to where I will take some of these generators apart, much like you can see here, because the more I started digging into this to getting to the carburetor, the more I realized it was actually pretty buried in there. So I took most of this generator apart, started inspecting it, and then I realized servicing this thing is actually kind of a nightmare. Again, with a carburetor being 90% of the problems, these are one of the things that you need to be able to get to on the regular, which is that small speed jet, or even just taking the carburetor off so you can clean it and service it if even the main jet gets plugged up as well. Now, just trying to take it off of here is doable, but it is not easy whatsoever. You actually have to fight with it quite a bit in order to do it because there's so many things that are attached. It just makes it kind of a nightmare. So I started taking things apart just to kind of see what the rest of the generator is like. And again, as soon as I put this back together and I ended up cleaning out the pilot jet, then it fired right up and it ran as normal. And again, that's not the fault of the generator. That's just, again, dumb luck of having debris in the fuel, or maybe it's just bad fuel from a gas station that you went to and more. Now, when it comes to servicing like the air filter or doing an oil change or even the spark plug is not terribly bad. And a lot of people will ask about valve adjustments as well. Don't touch the valves if the generator runs fine. I've seen people, they want to adjust and check valves on a brand new engine and then they go and screw it up. There is an old term out there that still holds true today. If it isn't broke, don't fix it. If it fires up like it's supposed to and runs correctly, it doesn't backfire or it doesn't diesel when you shut it off, then leave the thing alone. It's funny how many people create more problems by trying to fix something that doesn't need to be fixed. Now, I do like this generator. It's actually not that bad of a price, but the only problem is, again, is that I like to be able to service stuff. And if I can't get to the carburetor easy, no matter what it is, if it's a car or a truck that I've owned, I still like to work on some of the things myself. And if I can't work on it easy, it's gone. I don't keep it. That's also why there's certain generators I like more than other models, because I know that if I'm out using it, and I've done this before for other people, I'll be out at some camping site or some race or whatever it is I'm doing, they'll have problems with their generator, it won't start. And you know what the problem is, which we've already talked about, is the pilot jet. Or because they never clean it, it'll be their spark arrestor will be so sooted up that the engine can't breathe. So those are kind of a couple of the problems. Usually 3 problems is the carburetor, the spark plug, or this guy right here because the engine can't breathe. So those are things I like to look for, is that can I fix this while I'm not at home with basically the bare minimal amount of tools? This one would be very hard to do. Now, it does come with a 2-year warranty, but again, that doesn't take care of some of the issues that you might have with the carburetor. Again, it's a love-hate thing. I like the design. I like how quiet it is. It starts up really well, but I don't like the fact that I can't service this easy. And taking this thing apart, there are a lot of pieces. The other one is way easier to work on. The only thing you're really getting the benefit of is the smart communication through the Bluetooth, which I bet we will see more of that in some of their other models later. Now, if they do make other generators coming up, one of the things they do need to really think about is serviceability, because I don't know a lot of places that can service this. Even though small engine shops will be able to do your basic maintenance, if you take it to them, a small engine shop should be able to identify that engine. I don't even work on small engines anymore, and I can pretty much open the side of a generator and know what engine is in there, or I can at least fix it, because these aren't any different from 20 years ago. It's the same engine, it's a carburetor, it's simple to work on. If you have that background and knowledge, you can work on these and do all your basic maintenance and fix pull cords and more. But again, this generator, you have to split the whole case and everything and take it all apart. Now, overall, does this unit work good with all my basic testing? Yes, besides the plug carburetor that I fixed, overall, this is actually done really well, and I'm pretty impressed with how easy it starts and just how flawless it's been working with the basic testing that I've been doing. Now, people will ask me, well, is it a good generator? I don't know. I have no idea because it's brand new. You have no idea, like on a 2025 Chevy truck, is it a good vehicle? We don't know yet. Wait till you get 30,000 miles on it, then we can tell if there's problems that arise. So like anything that's brand new, you have to wait till you get users out there to provide some feedback. I'm only one person, and I can only tell you what I've done in the 4 to 5 hours that I've looked at this. So far, I don't have any doubts on the engine. It has a steel sleeve. It's a Ratto Engineering engine. That should be fine. Are the rest of the electronics going to hold up under normal wear and tear? We don't know yet. Again, it's a brand new unit, so we'll have to wait till some data comes out on this. But I think we've covered some of the basics on this unit now. We're going to go ahead and move on to the 4000. Okay, we have the big boy. Now this guy I've already done a review on, and so far basic testing is showing that it's good. But again, it's brand new. We don't have a lot of data, a lot of runtime on it. So I've got about 12, 13 hours on this so far, and I haven't had any issues with carburetor plugging or any of the other basic stuff. So far, under normal use conditions, it runs fine, it starts fine. The only biggest thing I have with this one, it is actually the loudest one of the bunch. And it's actually quite a bit louder than I was hoping for an inverter generator. Normally inverter generators are quieter because they have a whole box that goes all the way around it. They make open frame inverter generators, they have for years, much like a traditional open frame. It's just an inverter, so it's putting out clean power, just like this. But because this one is kind of more compact, it doesn't kind of have as much sound dampening material that it could have like you would see on a Predator 3500. Look how big they are. They're an engine that's sitting inside of a huge sound box. That way the sound waves can be dampened before they get external and we hear it. Versus this one is kind of more compact. It's smaller, but again, it ends up being just a little bit louder. Now, is this as loud as an open frame generator? No. This is actually a little bit quieter. Myself, I would have liked to have seen it deadened a little bit, and I tell companies this all the time, no matter who asks me, at least my opinion, I will tell them if you make your generator quieter than most anybody else out there, you will pretty much win, because that is the most common question I get. Almost 80% of the questions, how loud is it? That is what everybody wants to know. They don't even care about reliability. They just want to be like, well, how loud is it? And I was like, well, it's a little bit louder, but it runs great. Well, I don't want it if it's loud. Now behind these two little trap doors, you do have the DC connection input right here, and then you do have a little battery port right there. Now again, if you read the manual, you actually don't need the battery that's in here, because again, if you use that DC cable, power can be supplied from Delta Pro 3 or Delta Pro directly back in here, and it'll use the power from Delta Pro to start up this unit, which is pretty cool. So now, if you have a dead battery on this, you don't have to worry about it. Of course, you could still pull start it. Now this generator here comes with a 196cc engine, again from Ratto Engineering. They are one of the better manufacturers out there, and I do like seeing Ratto engines inside generators. They're common, they have a good record, and again, they are one of the more common engines that we see in a lot of generators out there. Now being that this is 196cc's, there were some similarities of this one being kind of like a Honda clone, much like in the Honda EU3000. Now I never once said it is a Honda engine, but there's a lot of times where Honda clones are made all over the place and they have proved to run thousands of hours. Just like the Yamaha clone engines that we talked about earlier, which Yamaha has actually been giving engines to several manufacturers for years. A full-on Yamaha engine with the Yamaha stamping, and this doesn't even have to go with generators, it's in power sports as well, whether it's motorcycles, jet skis, and more. When I was working on jet skis, there was a new line of product that came out, which was a wet jet that actually had a Mastercraft sticker on it, and it had a Yamaha engine in it. The same thing that you would see in a Yamaha Superjet stand-up if there's any watercraft guys out there. They would use the same engine, but Yamaha has given away engines since pretty much the late 80s, and it's no different in these generators as well. And now that they've all been cloned and copied, this is basically just a GX200 Honda engine copy is all it is. That's all they do is copy engines from years ago because they know they run good. Now when it comes to serviceability on this one is quite a bit easier because you can get to this carburetor. I can pop this one off pretty quick, get to the small speed jet, unplug it, put it back together, and away I go. Air filter is easy, also your oil changes, and not to mention if you have to clean out your spark arrestor, that is also an easy service as well. Again, you can get a starter for this one as well, but this one will take a little bit more work to pop off the side panels and get to the other side where the starter is. This one also has a cap up here so you can get to the spark plug, so serviceability on this one is actually not bad at all. I wish there was a door on the other side. That is where EcoFlow needs to figure out is a little bit easier serviceability to carburetors, kind of like this one. You can get to it easy, and not to mention being able to get to the starter on the other side just in case those do go out. And the starters, again, they're cheap. They're like $50. Now this is an inverter generator. It's a little bit more traditional like the ones that we use, like let's say Predator, 3,500 starting watts, 3,000 running. This is a little bit like the same with 4,000 starting watts, 3,200 running watts on gasoline, or 2,900 running watts on propane. Now again, You shouldn't be just running your generator wide open throttle. That is for the once in a while for a few minutes and then back down. Now, one of the nice things actually when using EcoFlow products is that you don't actually run the generator so much anymore like you used to. When you had a power outage or a hurricane, you would fire up your generator and away it went for 24 hours versus now you're using these to charge batteries. You can use this and you can charge that Delta Pro 3 in a very short amount of time and then shut it off. So now your generator usage from years ago, it has dropped considerably. When you might run a generator again for 24 hours, you're maybe running this only 6 to 8 hours a day at most, maybe even less depending on how much power you're drawing. Because when the power is out, it's not about just being able to use everything at once again. An emergency situation, you should be using minimal amounts of power and only what you need in critical situations. Hence having critical loads in your house that way you can run the bare minimum to keep your refrigerator on, or if you do need to power a heater in worse circumstances, you can do that. But it's not to be able to just live life to the fullest when the power is out and be like, hey, look at me, I can run everything still, and then in a couple hours all of your power is gone and all of your fuel is gone. You're supposed to conserve your resources in those circumstances. Now, I did get a lot of questions about this generator not firing up when it's cold. I guess some testers ended up putting this thing into a freezer and then they ended up trying to fire it up on propane. Well, I do have some problems with that kind of a test because one, again, remember, this is just a basic engine. It has a carburetor. If you had a car from the 1960s or 70s with a carburetor, and if you lived in Boston or somewhere where it's frozen, it's very likely your car is not going to start up. If it does, it's going to take a long time before it even runs correctly. I'm sure some of the older folks will agree that they were in some kind of frozen tundra and it took forever for their cars to start. Certain models did better than others, but these are not modern engines. They do not have direct fuel injection or fuel injection at all to control the fuel mixture. And then again, if you have a frozen engine that you were taking a frozen liquid and trying to introduce it into the engine, because I don't know about you, but propane comes out completely like frozen. It's negative 40 degrees or something when it comes out of the nozzle. And what some of the information people were giving me, and plus, by the way, if you read the manual, like I tell many of my viewers, this does have a choke on it. It's that little yellow lever right there. It stands out, and every one of these generators has a choke because it's a carburetor. So again, reading the manual can provide you a lot of good information when it comes to any of the products you use out there. And I've told this to many of my viewers out there, 90% of the questions that come to me are answered inside of the manual. And just because one model says not to do this, the next model you may have to do something different because they've made changes. Now again, people are going to want to know, is this a good generator? Well, so far, yeah, it is, but I don't have enough data. It's only been out for a couple months. Wait till I get 6 months or a year, and then I can give you some good realistic information from me still using it and from other users that I will pull information from. That's how I gather my data. I don't just look at one video and then, oh wow, that's the truth right there. You have to pull your information from a lot of different sources. That's what I do. I go on to Google, I go on to different websites, and I pull a lot of information and gather up some kind of a conclusion versus just testing one unit and then all of a sudden I've made my decision that this Ford truck or this thing is a piece of junk. Well, how many are there out there first? Is there only one or two, or is there 1,980 people have had good luck? Because that would be a good ratio. And just like any other piece of equipment out there, you're going to have bad units and good units. And sometimes people may not like to hear this, but sometimes the problem is that you don't know how to actually operate the equipment properly, and so then you end up blaming the equipment versus yourself. Sometimes people have a hard time taking responsibility for things, which maybe people won't like what I'm saying and they might even unsubscribe, which, hey, you know, the truth hurts sometimes, but not everybody is good at using machinery. That's just the way it is. I'm not very good at using computers, but I can rebuild the engine on this. So we all have our pros and cons, just like pieces of equipment do. Now, overall, I'm going to give you guys another review on this, just like whenever I do a review on these, I give you an introductory review on all the products that I try to use. If the product is good enough, then I will continue to use it and give you an updated review, normally like 3-6 months later. That way I can see if it's still a good product for me, and also I will try to pull information from other users out there. That way if everybody is having problems, then I can recommend it to people or not. That's how I pull and gather data, is from several different sources, not just one. Now, so hopefully this information helped you out as far as EcoFlow smart generators. Now, if you're looking for other traditional generators to charge up maybe other EcoFlow products, you can use any other inverter generator out there as long as it is an inverter. It can be an open frame, it could be a closed frame, it all depends. The open frames are much easier to work on. They're also a lot cheaper and a lot lighter, and it still can be an inverter. So if you happen to have land or distance between neighbors, then get the cheaper one. It is so much easier and so much lighter. You don't need it to be quiet or put some kind of a zombie box around it or whatever it is you want to do, and it'll be plenty fine, and you're going to save a ton of money that way. The ones that are enclosed like this, or a Champion 4500 or Predator 3500, those are great because they are quiet. Those are the ones that are a little bit more considerate to your neighbors, but if you have land, I would go with the cheapest open frame I can get that's an inverter and just run that. Save your money. Now, if you're looking for good generators out there, I highly recommend the Champion 4500. That is a great unit. Also, the Win 3800 and the Win 4500, they all use the same engine. Even the Predator 3500, it's still a good generator. It's been proven. I would not use the Predator 5000. It still has too many issues. Now, when it comes to using a generator for Delta Pro Ultra, you can pretty much use any inverter generator that you want. You can use some of the newer non-inverter generators. As long as the total harmonic distortion is only 10% or less, well, then you can still use those to charge it up. Now, hopefully this information helped you out to figure out if a smart generator is a good item for you. I will be doing updates again, but these take time, and it takes sometimes months in order to get good information. Now, I will leave information down below on recommended generators that I know that work. That way you guys can purchase something that you know you'll feel good about, that should last you a long time, and that can be serviced. Most Champion and Win generators can be serviced at tons of local shops. And I hope the information I provided you is helpful, and now you can make an informed decision on whether these are right for you, and I hope to see you guys in another video.